This episode is brought to you by Udemy. Leaders face challenges every single day, evolving workplace culture, closing skills gap, and let's not forget about the global recession nipping at our collective heels. That's why Udemy Business is bringing you a new podcast called Leading Up. Hear fresh perspectives and insights from business and leadership experts. Every episode is short, only 20 minutes, and shares inspiration, advice, and research to help you work, lead, and live differently. Host Alan Todd has seen firsthand how these challenges can drive creativity, exciting business outcomes, and an inventive spirit. Listen to Leading Up on your favorite podcasting app or follow Leading Up so you never miss an opportunity to move business forward.
Warning. This podcast is about the realities of working in people operations. This is not a stuck-up, PC, compliance-based, or employment law podcast about stuffy, outdated HR practices. Shit will get real here, and we assume no responsibility.
At what point does someone in HR need to take responsibility? And I get it. I get that we are simply advisors. They teach us that in college, that we are there to advise the business.
This is the People Problems Podcast with Alexa Baggio and Tyson McKenzie.
What's up, Tyson?
What is up is that I'm coming at you from the fastest internet of all time.
Oh,
so
what happened to your country-ass Wi-Fi?
Let me roll back a little bit. So I guess this was last week. I'm trying to upload one of our videos onto Instagram, okay? So, like, this is what I do. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, a lot of uploading.
Socials.
My upload speed, get this, when I did the speed test, it was 0.67 was my upload speed. Okay.
Like less than a megabyte? Wow.
0.67. So here I am, like, trying to upload this video, and it's, like, timely, right? Like, I really want to get this video up, posted on Instagram. So I'm like, screw this. I'm walking to the community center. So I pack up the baby, and we start walking, and it's a beautiful sunny day. And as I'm walking, like, I live, like, in a forested area, so I can only really see one part of the sky, like, when I look out my house. So I look, and I'm like, all right, we're good. So off we go, and as I'm looking up again, I'm like, oh, crap, there's, like, some clouds in the sky. And it's about 2.5 kilometers to the community center, okay? I sound like such a pumpkin right now, but anyways, so I'm walking along, and, like, doesn't the friggin' sky just turn black, okay?
Opens up on
so
you.
it's just black, and you hear, like, the rolling thunder in the distance, and I was like, shit. So, like, we start, like, picking up the pace a little bit, and, like, we get to the community center, and I'm like, phew, we made it. Okay, so I can, like, jump in here, wait out the rain, upload my video. Isn't the power off in the community center? So not only is there no Wi-Fi in the community center because the power's out, but because all the doors are like their security system is based on the power, I can't even get in to the community center. So now I'm like, okay, I'm about like 2.5 kilometers from home. Like, do I run for it? Or do I just like wait it out like underneath like an awning or something?
Yeah.
Anyways, so I was able to wait it out, and it was like me and like 3 little like skater kids because they were using the skate park at the community center, and we're just like waiting, and I've got like my baby, and like the thunder is like really a lot, and like we get hefty storms where I am, like really bad, like they're called like derechos or something. They come in just like out of nowhere and just like pfft. Anyways, so I just like waited it out, and it turned out okay. But with that, I kid you not, it had to have been maybe the next day, okay? This is so weird. So I had this like debacle with the internet. The next day, for the first time since I've lived in this house for 2 years, the internet guy is going door to door, knocks on my door. He's like, hey, I can set you up for like faster internet. And I'm like, how convenient. Like, it's like a message from the gods, honestly. So here I am.
I've been praying to these gods for at least a year's worth of episodes.
They have answered
so
everybody's prayers. So here I am with hopefully faster internet.
Good Wi-Fi
we'll see.
gods. You have to pray to
how
the
it
good
goes.
Wi-Fi gods. I have
And
been
it
praying to the good
happened.
Wi-Fi gods for a year for you. So I'm glad that you've turned me into a faithful woman. I'm so happy to hear that. My whole team
So
will be
good.
fucking ecstatic. The team will be stoked. Well, congratulations on your faster Wi-Fi. You're big girl. You got big girl Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Very proud of you. Very proud of you. Incredible. Well, speaking of being a big girl, let me read us in here, and then we'll get cracking on today's topic. Today's episode is brought to you by our community, the People Ops Society. Join Tyson, myself, a bunch of our guests, and a lot of our listeners in the Pops Community Forum. Download awesome resources and templates shared by peers. Get access to cool free resources like Tyson's Art of Compensation course. Available to all members at no extra charge. Use the code PeopleProblems at peopleopsociety.com to get 20% off your membership today. Again, use the code PeopleProblems, all caps, all one word, at peopleopsociety.com. All right, Tyson, today we are going to talk, just you and me. It's just an Alexa and Tyson episode. Our favy. And we're just going to talk about one of the sort of maybe the stereotypes or caricatures of the HR professional, which is that HR people are wallflowers. And we're going to debate this. We're going to talk about this topic, but this comes from a couple things. One, just having worked in and around the industry for many, many years, it is sort of a known persona that, HR people are not, and again, we're generalized. I want to call out that we are wildly generalizing, and we're going to use a lot of unfair blanket statements to talk about this, so relax. We're aware. But not known to be risk takers, not known to be the first one to speak up and say, hey, I disagree.
And we saw that in our misconceptions episode too.
We
right?
did.
There were
we did.
some
we did.
misconceptions along those
Right.
lines.
Right. So we're sort of double clicking on this one a little bit. And so I think I'd like to start the conversation with just a little bit about, maybe let's regurgitate the misconception, if you think it is a misconception. And let's talk a little bit about this sort of known persona. Because obviously the irony here is that you're in HR and you're not a wallflower. So
And most of our guests have not been either,
they're not.
which is, like, so funny.
Most of the people we have on this podcast are not wallflowers. A few we've had to poke, but for the most part, they were not guests on this podcast.
Right.
We tend to gravitate towards the louder bunch, but curious what you think of this. When I say wallflowers in HR, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's just definitely been this, again, whether it's the misconception or not, like the misconception that like HR is really just there to sort of like do what they're told, make the business they listen to what the business has to say and they kind of just like do it without like being a yes man sort of thing, not ever like questioning, pushing back, providing other opportunities for things that they could do differently. So there's like definitely this, and again, is it a misconception? Maybe yes, maybe no. There's also this huge challenge in HR that so many of us have, imposter syndrome. And I've talked about this recently on HR Shook, but there's this sort of this opposing thing where it's like, people just feel like we're there to be walked over. We're feeling a sense of imposter syndrome. And it's kind of like the perfect storm for us just to sort of like do what we're told to do and not ever sort of lay our foot down or put our foot down, that sort of thing. So it's kind of this like double thing. And I think oftentimes the reason is, and at least for me, and I'll speak from my own personal experience, anytime that I've felt imposter syndrome, it's because I've just been this sort of maybe an entry level or very new to my career. And here I am advising vice presidents, directors, senior managers. So I'm never really advising people that are at my level or working with people at my level. Oftentimes HR is thrown in with managers. And like if they're pushing back on something, it would be to a manager, director level. So maybe that's where my imposter syndrome has always come from. I'm like, who am I to be advising these particular individuals? But so I think that there definitely is some truth to this misconception, because a lot of HR folks just don't speak up. And I know in my experience, a lot of what we talk about with like amongst HR is like, how do we not be wallflowers and how do we learn to push back and that sort of thing. So it's obviously,
right.
There's
Yeah,
obviously
this
some
is
truth
what we
to
talk
it.
about this on Pops all the time. It's like people are
Yep.
always asking questions about like, how do I raise this thing? And it's like, well, let's talk about how you raise
How
that
do I
thing.
build credibility? How do
Yeah.
I build like
Yeah.
confidence? Yeah, a ton of that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So I think if I was to step back for a quick second, looking at this from the business side of things, is like, I always wonder, like, is this a symptom, or is this a symptom of just the fact, like the conversation we always have, which is like, HR has an administrative history.
Mm-hmm.
It has a clerical history. And a lot of what I think, the reason we're here and we get fired up about this stuff is like, we think there is actually a bifurcated side of this, which is like the strategy and the sort of like more people dynamic team optimization, human optimization piece of this. And that those two things, all depending on the organization, just get lumped under HR, right? So sometimes I think the issue is like the HR function or the weight in the organization has shifted, and maybe the people in that position or that group have not necessarily shifted with the times, right? So I'm speaking of like old school, very administrative, very bureaucratic, quote unquote HR departments, and they very much still exist. I think they are slowly being phased out as larger organizations realize that operations, like true operations and clerical work and administration, can largely be farmed out or outsourced, and that the people function is actually different and needs to be optimized differently. But it definitely still happens. And so part of me wonders, is this like a chicken or the egg, right? Like, is this the persona of a lot of, or the sort of known persona of HR people, because there's just been so many people in these more administrative clerical roles where they didn't need to be thought-provoking and sort of, a little more E than I on the, the Myers-Briggs and all these things? Or is it that like this kind of work just attracts maybe people who are more willing to sit back, because to your point, they're not in the steering wheel. They're always the passenger when you're working with a manager or executive team or whatever, right? You're not on the front lines. You're an internal advisor. So for me, it's hard to tell. I will say, having done this podcast for a year with you and having worked with sort of thousands of people that I would consider to be sort of quote unquote new age or new guard HR, all of our POPs community members, all of that, I don't think this persona is as baked and as long for this world as it used to be. I'm talking to a perfect example of it right now. I think the profession is starting to change and attract more people. A lot of our guests, for example, that have a lot more of the like, no, I'm coming to this from like, I'm going to tell you the things that you need to hear that are uncomfortable. We need to have a different kind of conversation here. But I don't know, maybe that's recency bias.
Yeah, and I definitely think that too, and I do think, like, I think that as, like, a profession, like, not only are the people in HR becoming a lot more, like, skilled and savvy, and it's attracting a lot more people who are, like, more interested in the strategy side of things and less of the administrative, but also I think there's such a better understanding from the business of what HR can do, so that
I think we have a ways to go, but I think the business community is starting to kind of pick their head up and go, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. And there are some managers that really respect the function and are like, holy crap, like I am only as good as like my HR like, that kind of thing. But then there's also the managers that there's still so many managers that don't understand that. So it's, oh, hey, Tyson, can you submit this form for me? And it's like, no, that's not what I do. Right. So it's like that then again, but then I might be like, as the HR person, you know what? Like, might as well. It's easier just for me to submit his performance forms than for, me to have to explain it. And then there I am, just a pushover. And then it's like the HR wallflower misconception is just like, pushed in further. But I think so I'll share the sort of current events or recent events that led, I think, to this conversation, because I think it'll be really good for conversation here. So I think most people at this point know about the situation in Canada where Lisa Laflamme was fired shortly after. She's a news anchor that has had a very long career with Bell Media, was, very sought, like everyone respected her, etc. I guess what happened was there was a conversation amongst managers where someone said a comment, something like, who allowed her to let her hair go gray? And then shortly after, she was fired for really a business decision was the reasoning, right? As these conversations always, it was a business decision. Yeah. So that was one thing that happened. And then another individual, her name was Danielle Graham. She came up on Twitter and said that she was also fired. And the timing of her termination was such that she submitted a formal complaint about harassment to HR. They had a meeting scheduled, let's say, March 11th. Formal complaint submitted to HR. A meeting with HR about that complaint on March 11th. She was called in and fired on March 10th because of a business decision. And then there was another woman, Jennifer Valentine, again, similar circumstances. I don't have all the details on this one, but again, a situation where there was like, potential harassment, investigation, that sort of thing, like, and it just was fired for kind of like no reason. So at what point does someone in HR need to take responsibility? And I get it. I get that we are simply advisors. They teach us that in college. They literally teach us in college that we are there to advise the business. We do not make decisions. There's a name for it. It's on the HRPA exam. I got that question wrong. I can still remember. I don't get many questions wrong.
I'm glad you got that question wrong.
I don't get a lot of test questions wrong. I'm very nerdy, but I got this question wrong in college. And, but they teach us this, that we're simply advisors. But at what point did someone not say, hey, what the hell? I have a meeting.
Fire people who have an open investigation.
I have a meeting with this individual on Thursday. Let's not fire them on Wednesday.
Well, yeah. Okay. So, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole. It could, if I were to play the like complete benefit of the doubt hat, if I was to put that on for a second, I would be like, this is just speaking of being clerical, some fucking clerical error where somebody decided to fire this person. And no one had the ability to be like, do you know they have an investigation meeting tomorrow?
No. Never, ever, ever in the history of my career. This is Bell Media. This is my new fast internet, okay?
Plausible deniability. Maybe they can play that card. Maybe they'll try.
This is not mom and pop, right? Like, this is a huge company with huge
that's
HR
what I'm
departments.
Saying, but that's why I'm saying is maybe they're so big that it's such a mess. But 3 times is no longer a coinky dink.
And it's so, like, are you serious? Like, anytime that anyone gets fired, just so people, like, if anyone's wondering, if someone's going to be fired, it's not just like, okay, let's just fire them tomorrow. There is file reviews.
Yeah.
There are so much conversations. Have they been on a short-term disability leave lately? Are they suffering? Do they have any mental health concerns?
Do they have any open investigations?
Is there anything else I should be thinking about? Now, like you said, this could be a company that's so big that investigations are getting handled over here and the terminations getting handled over here.
Yeah.
Sure, yes, but I am going to say it now. I think that the HR person who was responsible and working with the manager for this termination has a due diligence that they have to do. And somebody fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, I do feel as though HR people need to start holding the line, because then what happens, this was posted on Twitter, this timeline, again, specifically about the Graham situation where she was fired like the day before her investigation conversation. And somebody puts on Twitter, they're like, never talk to HR, don't trust HR, and then all of the HR hate begins.
Yep.
And it's like, I actually would also hate on that HR individual because they fucked up and they weren't doing their job. I'm going to be honest. I'm sorry. Someone's got to hold the line.
Someone's got to hold the line. I think it's very important, especially as people who are calling for change in an industry, that we examine internally. You know, we can't just be haters. Like, we got to look at the existing, the sort of the way things are done around here now.
Totally.
Not just, bitch and talk about the future, but so look, I was playing devil's advocate there. I think it is entirely possible that there is an investigations team that is over here and but to your point, I think it is very, very unlikely that the people who were somehow involved in or around knowing about that complaint being filed were not also the people involved in the termination meeting. There's no chance that they are completely ignorant of that.
They would have been connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
So,
and so look, sometimes in HR, because there's sticky situations when we're firing people, what do? Again, we work for Bell Media. What do we do when there's a sticky situation? You call your legal team.
Right.
Why was that not like? Oh, and again, maybe it was done. Maybe they're extremely risky.
Maybe they got bad legal advice. Truthfully, maybe they got advice that was like, the best thing you can do is let this person go for a plausible. If you can articulate a plausible business case that you've got in writing with proof prior to this complaint, that's probably your safest bet, is just get them the fuck out of here before this goes through. And it's possible that was the advice they got.
But so here's the thing: we're also talking about Canada here, and I think Ontario. So I have once in my career done a termination where we were investigating sort of at the same time, and there was a termination involved. You, again, have to make sure that person understands that the investigation is going to continue. And the reasoning behind this, it was a bigger layoff. It was a business situation that happened. Like, we were letting go like all sorts of people.
They got let go for a business reason?
But it was like, we have a shortage of work. Like, we have to let some people go. There was like a whole bunch of people. Anyways, so then you have to do the due diligence of continuing that investigation even after they're an employee, and that person knows. like that person, like they're involved in that, so they would
Right.
have to know,
Right.
like they would
Right.
know about
Right.
that. So she
Right.
wouldn't be on Twitter posting how like horribly it was handled if that was
Right.
the case.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Let's go back to the crux of this episode, which is why did no one speak up? And I think, again, if I come at this from sort of the institutional side of it, I get worried that there is in some way a screening for in sort of the design of HR teams. One of the reasons why I whack so hard about like just redesigning the whole thing and possibly even rebranding it. Just had to get one in there. I had to get one in there. Is that, you know, it's very possible, and I've seen it many, many times. I've seen it with executives in general, not just HR teams, where the team is structured around a leadership that just doesn't want that function to have a voice. They just didn't hire someone that was going to talk back. They didn't hire someone that was going to say, I'm going to put my foot down on this one. We shouldn't be firing people with open investigations before their investigations have been started or been, you know, at least concluded with an interview. So I wonder if, in some ways, you know, are these just organizations who have sort of conveniently organized their HR teams to not be in the way? Or are there, and it's probably both and, right? Of course, usually is, but, or are these situations where someone, and again, this is hard, so I want to talk about it, where someone really should have or could have put their foot down and didn't because of personal interest, right? And that is a really hard place to be. And let's be very clear about HR and probably legal are the only two functions I can think of where if you are to stand up like this in a way that is, I don't want to call it righteous because probably not righteous, probably mostly out of like legal obviousness. It's very likely that your job is on the line.
Like fear of retaliation.
Exactly. Well, just like we can't have an HR person who's going to stand up and tell us we can't fire the people we want to fire. They got to go. Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and look, everyone fears for their job. Like, we have to remember that in all of these conversations about work is like, no one is trying to get fired. Everyone's trying to feed their family. Everyone's trying to keep a roof over their head. You know, Maslow's hierarchy and all that jazz. But
I think the thing is, so I've just sort of like rhymed off, like, as I was sharing the example, like alternatives, right? So you're right. You never want to be the HR person that every time you go to them, it's just like, no, we can't do that. No, that's how we end up like the police, right?
Yeah, right.
But this is a situation where we say, look, this is what we've got going on right now. And you probably wouldn't even disclose all of the details. Like, you can't disclose the details of the investigation to the manager as well. There's like a respect to like some confidentiality that goes with that process. Yeah. But it's like, look, we have to finish this first. Or this is like the way that we can finish this in a way, like, you know, if we have to fire them today, this is how we're going to continue this process over here, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there are so many ways. It's kind of like a not right now, but like we'll figure it out together. And that, I think, is the key to being a successful HR partner is that, and that's what's going to elevate us to the next level is like, look, we've got all these things to consider. Let's do the right thing. Because now what's happening? Well, everybody's like, like, this is like a whole thing. Like, I know with the Lisa LaFlamme situation, like, people of Canada are completely in uproar, and there's like petitions to like reinstate her, and like, you know what I mean? Like, people are pissed. The consumer is pissed. The customer is pissed.
And so part of me, again, I don't know if this is a personality thing. And again, I will say I've worked with thousands of HR people in my career at this point. A lot of them are wallflowers. Like, they're not risk takers.
I work in HR. I know.
They're not even going to buy a fucking software unless someone else in their same industry with the same number of employees who looks just like their company has bought a software. Like, it's crazy. I just don't operate that way, so I struggle to empathize in some ways. But at the same time, I get it because you're between a rock and a hard place, literally professionally. Like, that's literally where you exist, is between the rock and the hard place sometimes. And so I just wonder, in these instances, like, so for example, one of the things business owner, one of the things you do all the time, when you're starting businesses, launching businesses, whatever, trying to grow businesses, trying to fold businesses, whatever, is you're constantly scenario planning. So you're constantly saying, what's the best, middle, and worst case scenario based on the decision I'm about to make? And you run that through a couple of your decisions, right? So you're like, okay, well, if or a couple of things that are quasi-likely outcomes, right? So you're like, If A happens, here's the best, middle, and worst case scenario. If B happens, here's the best, middle, and worst case scenario, right? And I look at a situation like this thing with Bell Media, and I'm like, where the fuck was the chart that said, when we fire this woman prior to her investigation being concluded, that the best case scenario was like, we get out of this scot-fucking-free? There's no chance that was a reality. And it's these decisions that get made that, to your point, you're like, where was someone in that meeting being like, this is a terrible fucking idea? But then I look at it, I'm like, okay, let's presume there was someone in that meeting that was like, this is a bad fucking idea. Have we not given them, as a profession, as a academic fucking exercise, the skill set to walk into that meeting and go, there's not a single way I can articulate this decision as not being a bad idea, right?
Or I also wonder,
all roads lead to bad idea.
Are we in so much shit as a profession that the person who raised their hand and was like, don't do it because this is what's going to happen, is so disrespected?
Yeah.
Not listened to, not respected enough to listen to their opinion.
Right.
That the managers were like,
I worry about that for sure.
We're going to go and do it anyways, and you're going to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I totally worry about that. I think we're saying
so
the same thing
I have
there.
compassion. I have compassion to that. For sure.
Do. That's where it's like, did the institution hire this kind of person, or is this person just somehow they've wound up contextually being the person that no one respects? And the latter one, I think, is the one we have control over. The former one, where they're hiring for a certain kind of person that's just going to be submissive to the C-suite, is not something we can control, right? So for our listeners who want some fucking like practical implications and like but what the fuck do we do about it, Alexa and Tyson?
So what happens?
The latter situation where the function, or your function personally, or the role of someone on your team, maybe someone you work for, has become one where it lacks respect and it lacks clout. How did we get there? I think the first question is like, is this team reputationally known for example, always being the whistleblower, such that when the whistle gets blown, everybody's like, yeah, eye roll, we're moving on? Has the reputation of this team and the strategic function of this team become one such that people just look at us to be the doormat when we have to make hard decisions? Like, you have to look at the function critically from like how does it fit within the organizational team? And if you're getting the sense that, even if you're not the head of HR, or even if you're just on the team or in one of the sub-functions, depending on how big the team is, if you're getting the sense that the function is ineffective because that clout has been lost or that reputation has been dimmed, whether or not you were there for why that happened or not, but reputationally, those are the kinds of teams people need to stop working on.
Yeah.
Because those are the HR teams that need to be burnt to the ground and rebuilt. Because this is the shit that happens, is you just render the HR team useless, nobody respects their opinion, or they don't speak up because they feel like they're going to get chewed out, and then you just don't have an effective, healthy, sort of governing
so your
team.
advice would just be to quit?
No, I mean, that's great advice. Everyone's like, fuck off, I can't just quit my job. No, advice would be
having an exit strategy
always
possible.
know your exits. We've talked about this.
Always know your exits.
Always know your exits. We've talked about this. I think everyone in life, look, you do enough crazy sports and shit, people will tell you, like, always know your exit strategy, right? Like, you're on a motorcycle, where are you going to dip if some car cuts you off, right? You're always supposed to see the exits. Where are you going to go? I think that's just good life advice. But more importantly, I think in these instances, one, be very discerning of that when you are joining a company. Hey, when was the last time that this team stepped in on a strategic decision and was taken seriously? Or, hey, when was the last time the HR team changed the course of something this business did? That's really important shit to ask. And then 3, I think, is like, start to have those conversations with your team. Hey guys, I'm a little worried, like internal PR for the HR team. I'm the new PR chick on the team. Like, I'm a little worried that when the only way that we present feedback to management, or when the only thing that we speak up about is something negative, or is something like, let's color inside the lines, or is something that's not one of these more favorable things, that we need to manage our reputation, and we need to be seen internally as both someone who adds value strategically, as well as someone, when we speak up and say no, people go, maybe we should rethink this. right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
I think teams have to do it for themselves. It's there's some onus on the active practitioner.
You do, and I really think that like the most important thing you can do in HR, and again, like I'm kind of focusing now on like a business partner role that's like manager facing, is to build trust. Like if you have one job, it's to build trust and credibility with the managers, your clients, so to speak, or like the managers that you support. Like if you don't have that trust, like what are you doing there other than the administrative work, right? Because the good stuff, the good work that we want to be a part of, the times where we can say to a manager, are you fucking off your rocker? Like there's no way you're going to do that. You're not doing that. Like, and I've had conversations like that. I can vouch that there are HR people that can have conversations like that, but you can say like, speak openly, speak candidly. They can come to you and be like, hey, I have this crazy idea. Let's talk about it. You can't do that until you have built credibility and you've built trust with those people on like a personal level. They know that you know what you're talking about. Like, you know, it's not just about you every time you have a one-on-one with them being like, you have to do your performance reviews. You have to make sure your team's completing your engagement surveys. You know, your numbers are here. Like you've only had 75% of people fill out their performance review. Like we don't want to be talking about that all the time. So with that, like that's where we start to lose credibility because every time we're reaching out to them, it's like with a to-do.
Yeah. Well,
and you're not actually asking about like figuring out what you can do to help them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think people forget that all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It happens in business all the time. People are like worried about, you know, an extra dollar on a contract or this. It's like, let's just focus on value for the client. Like, let's just focus on, that's the only reason we make money is to build value for other people, right? Full stop. That's what this is.
Yeah. And like, they're not there to help you finish your HR stuff.
Right.
You are there to help them
succeed
in business.
Yes, to make their team better.
Say it louder.
Like
honestly,
yeah,
it's not about checking HR boxes. It's about doing the HR stuff to make their team better.
But I will say on the other side of this, and I don't want to belabor this, but like you also can't be the martyr, right? Like that's also not an effective internal reputation. If you're and look, I know this comes from a good place, and I know so many people that have come to this profession recently and are like this, which is like every single conversation is like, but we need to do more for our people, but we need to do more for our people. And I'd say 99% of cases, that's totally true. But you can't constantly be going to management and saying, yes, but I need to do more. Yes, but we need more. Yes, but we are not doing good enough. Or, employees need more. Because then when you speak up and say, hey, I'm going to put my foot down on this, like, this is really not okay for us to be doing, you have lost reputational points because you're just the chick who's like flagrantly asking for more all the time because you want to do better for your employees. And I love that attitude. I think that's the right attitude to have. I think a balanced attitude is I'm trying to do the best for our population while doing what we need to do for the business. That's the goal. But you can't be the martyr either. You can't be the person that's constantly squawking like against management and then also be the person that's like, okay, management, I need you to shut the fuck up for a second and listen to me because I have something serious to say now. Like you can't be the HR person that cried. I don't know what Wolf would be in this example, but cried budget or something.
The HR person that cried poor engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a double-edged sword. But I would think if people took one thing out of this conversation, I would hope that it is worth a critical eye about what your internal reputation is, and generally maybe a start to that. We do this sometimes in my team meetings, where we'll just start the meeting and say, like, scale of 1 to 5, where you at? Right? Like, 5 is like having the best day of your life, and 1 is like, I struggled to get out of bed this morning. Like, where you at? Right? Maybe where's your team at in terms of comfort level pushing back to people that are not just the internal team?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you know, hey, I'm working with a team that is like a 1 on the speak up at a 5 scale, and I'm expecting these guys to give managers tough feedback, or we're trying to implement change. Like, there's lots of implications if people are not comfortable pushing back or conflict or just confident communicating harder things. You got to know that you're working with that, right? That's a real weakness to uncover, and arguably I think one you can do some good training and development around and all that jazz. So I would say if I was to give people one takeaway is like, you know, obviously hiring different personality types, cool, great, you can do that when you can hire, but not everybody's hiring all the time.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, people need to be a little bit more critical about, like, are we actually a team that is willing to do this if we have to?
Yeah, and I just, like, hope that, like, I don't know, I personally feel responsibility for a lot of these things, and I hope that more HR people do, even though, like, we started this conversation with, look, like, we're not necessarily decision makers, and I totally get that, but we also are, like, there to protect people, protect the companies, and, like, make sure things get done in a certain way.
And about how you act in a situation. So you are not these people. You're not off the hook.
So speak the fuck up.
The decision exactly. If you were in the room and didn't speak the fuck up, you are complicit. And again, I realize in some situations, literally your job might be on the line, and not everyone is willing to make the decision. Like, not everything is so bad that the company's doing that's worth putting your job on the line.
Totally.
But you make 2 or 3 of those calls, you probably need to start thinking about why you're at that company.
Right, and you're undoing all the hard work that Alexa and I have been.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck you for making this harder for us.
You're bringing down the HR profession.
God damn it. No,
I have compassion for everybody that works in HR.
I do. And tell us, like, reach out. Tell us. I'm sure there's more hard scenarios than we can even think of in this quick episode, but, like,
totally.
Reach out. Tell us what you've struggled with. Tell us about a time you did talk up. Yeah, a time you didn't speak up. Like, we want to hear about this stuff, because this shit's real and this stuff matters. I think for the whole profession and also for people personally, like, this stuff is important. Yeah,
I think specifically with this episode, I would love people to send us their thoughts on what we've talked about, because this has been like a pretty touchy subject, I think. So I would love to hear thoughts on this one.
Yeah, and we still love you even if you're Wallflowers.
We love you all equally.
Yes, love you all equally. You don't have to be loud and obnoxious like us. All right, Tyson, that's a wrap. Don't forget to follow us at People Problems Pod, at hr.shook, and at The Influencer spelled with an HR. And obviously, most excitingly, announcing the launch of our People Problems hotline. You can call in and leave us a voicemail with your people problem, your responses, your questions, your thoughts, comments. Don't be a jerk. We'll give you our tips and tricks, and we can commiserate and find the humor with you. Call in at 310-564-6462. Feel free to remain anonymous or let us know who you are. Again, call the new People Problems hotline at 310-564-6462.
Wait a minute, before you leave, take some time to leave us a 5-star rating. We'd really love your feedback. Thanks!
This episode was executive produced by me, Alexa Baggio. Our intro music was also done by the wonderful Ellie Brigida of Pure Harmonies. You can find more information about us and future episodes at peopleproblemspod.com or follow us at peopleproblemspod on all things social. Thanks!